couple of headline breaches globally. The first one up there was the Snapchat one, which relatively recent, you'd have seen in the States, where people were told that their photographs would not be kept by the recipients. In fact, there was a bit of a mess up there. But the FTC didn't fine them, but they're keeping on monitoring for 20 years. So there's ongoing obligation for quite some time there. In the UK, we have BPAS, a hacker there, reasonably significant fine imposed of 200,000. Google, unfortunately for Google, has had a fairly whirlwind year. In France, imposed that fine for the inadequate privacy policy. And the same thing at the bottom here in Italy, they had a significant fine which was well reported and covered in privacy laws and business as well. Top there, a little bit old now, but an important one in Germany. That was the Deutsche Bahn Railways, who had excessive and inappropriate data screening of all their employees. And the regulator came down fairly heavily, €1 million plus euro fine back in 2009. Spain, we know we've all been reading the reports about the right to have your information removed from Google, but the Spanish regulator is pretty hot, and earlier this year imposed €50,000 fine for a fairly small breach by Vodafone. So it's just interesting to know the different scales and possible inconsistencies of approaches which businesses globally have to be aware of, because, as I said, there's no one-size-fits-all. Put up there, I was talking while I was having coffee outside to one of our colleagues about the data breach response in the USA. And of course, what we understand from Europe is that the concept of course, there's no comprehensive state law, different legislation and different approaches for sectors. But what I think is I've always understood, and when I'm advising my clients, that one has to assume, because the majority of states, I think it's all but one or two, do have a compulsory reporting regime. So we might not have a one-size-fits-all legislation, but the obligation from a breach perspective is there to report to the regulators if in the US you do get a breach. Over on the right-hand side, I won't go into it in great detail. These are just some examples of violation caps. California has been pretty hot. I don't know if anybody in the audience is operating there, but there's been significant fines and new approaches taken by the regulator there. And the FTC is imposing significant penalties throughout the states. Put up there something which I'll mention, PCI fines and penalties. For those of you who deal with the financial services sector or anything to do with credit card data losses, that's a big issue, both globally and particularly in terms of the levels of fines that are being handed out, contractual obligations, we're calling them fines, in the US and elsewhere.